And I hope those of you who are watching on YouTube and social media can see us just okay. YouTube has been really reliable. I don't know what's going on with LinkedIn, but hopefully you're able to find this. Let me know. I'm here sitting with my new friend, Kevin Fernando. And Kevin, I met through YouTube, believe it or not, as I was searching for content repurposing videos, and I found his and immediately just felt really resonated to his brand, the way that he creates content. So I really want this opportunity for us to have a casual chat. Please welcome, list your comments and questions. Your face is not going to show up on our live stream, so don't feel nervous at all. Ask your questions. And before we get started, I want to briefly introduce Kevin. Welcome, Kevin. Hello.
Thanks for having me, Faye. Excited to be here today and chat with everybody. Glad we got connected.
Totally agree. I'm so thrilled. And we have your audience here joining with us as well. And it's a great opportunity for us to really get to know each other. And if you're new to Kevin's work, well, he helps everyday people create online businesses while working part time or full time. So, especially if you still have a full time job, I really want you to know that this is not just for full time content creators only. He has been a serial entrepreneur and digital marketer for the past 12 plus years, from a six-figure annual e-learning agency to building and selling eComm stores. Kevin is here to share his experience with no reservation as an entrepreneur, as a content creator, in a time where building a personal brand, I agree, is no longer optional. This episode is particularly helpful, as I mentioned, if you're interested in working both full-time or part-time while building your personal brand. We want to talk about why it's absolutely possible. I think we're going to dive into corners such as affiliate marketing, content marketing, full stack content marketing. For those of you who think, well, I don't know how to niche down so far, or I'm really interested in, webinar and podcast and YouTube and kind of all the above. Can I really choose all of them? So we can really play around. So welcome, Kevin. I'm just so thrilled that I'm sitting here with another content creator and we're here to help others answer their questions.
Yeah, totally. I feel like, Faye, we've chatted a few times now, and I'm so glad you put this together. I'm like, yeah, I think just riffing off of each other, you probably really bring the audience a lot of value in this session, I'm feeling.
I totally agree because I mean, look at the tutorials and content we create on YouTube. We have to be so fast paced with the intro, the hook, content, and call to action, and done. And people don't really get to know you as a real person. And just found you very authentic, even during our first
Thank you.
conversation. Be so transparent. So I know you're currently working on something really exciting. It's going to be launching in 1 to 2 weeks. If people watching this a little bit later, they can get to know that. But may I invite you to maybe chat about the thinking behind and what you're putting together and why you're putting together something like that?
For sure. And firstly, Faith, thank you for the great introduction. And I'll just pick it up right where you left off. So quickly, I do run, as Faye mentioned, I run a YouTube channel, and I've been doing that for a long, long time. But I took many, many years off, and it's interesting, and I'll come back to it. But basically, I used to run. I've wanted to kind of be free and work for myself since I was about 21, and I've
Mhm.
built a bunch of businesses. I built an e-learning agency and ran that for 6 years. That's way before e-learning was easy and they had all these cool tools that could do it. This was when you had to hard code everything. I've
Mhm.
built e-commerce stores and all kinds of things. And the challenge is that these were really hard to run with limited time sometimes. And a lot of the time when I was doing this, I still had full-time jobs. And so, the transactional nature of it all was really kind of burning me out. And then since then, I've to put it shortly, I've really fallen in love with subscription based models, and so I ran a subscription box business. I even tried my hand at at an app that was a recurring software business, and then I fell into sort of affiliate marketing in a recurring way. And so the training I'm coming up, that's the short version. I could talk about it for an hour here, but the training I have coming up is really just going to talk about how you can build automated income streams with subscription-based products.
Oh, nice. So, what are some of the subscription-based products
Yeah,
would you recommend people to kind of look into? I know there are a really big variety here, and perhaps what is that 101 version for people who are very new to a subscription model business?
perfect. Yeah. So I mean, I can just say I'll just everyone's familiar with content subscriptions, whether that's Disney, Netflix, Then you're probably familiar with like software based ones. Like
Mhm.
if you notice, Microsoft has moved from having Office as like a one time thing to now it's a subscription. Adobe's a
Mhm.
subscription. So much software is, instead of like a one time
Mhm.
fee, is now a subscription. You see like Amazon Prime and Walmart Plus and Uber Eats. Then they're the kind of memberships.
Mhm.
And then even like you see everything is subscriptions, consumables, like you hear about razor subscriptions. I have a Peloton, so if you're familiar, it's like
Mhm.
I have a Peloton. So if you have it's a basically a bike, and it's got a screen and it's got a subscription, and you can, you pay for the bike, but you still got to pay for the content every month. So
Mhm.
everything is kind of moving in the subscription direction. And companies love it because it's like predictable income, it's
Mhm.
increased customer loyalty, and you get lower acquisition costs because people renew every month. So those are kind of the ones that everyone kind of knows about. But as an entrepreneur, you can't go build a fancy software.
Mhm.
And that's really, really hard. I trust me, I tried, I failed. Well, I didn't fail, but it was extremely, extremely difficult. It was
Mhm.
a long road, but
Mhm.
it didn't give me the returns I wanted. And then the other part of it is, you can't build a Netflix. That's not realistic,
Mhm.
right? What I share with everyone is, how to do two things, right? So a recurring revenue affiliate marketing, and so
Mhm.
those are affiliate products that pay you on a monthly basis, and membership sites. How you can kind of make a membership site, and the real trick to it is how do you sell that in a sustainable way
Mhm.
that's not spending all day posting in that membership site. So those are
Mhm.
kind of the two vehicles, if you will, that and I have a whole model around how to incorporate those two together. But that's kind of the nuts and bolts of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely is very intriguing to me. I was just having a conversation around with a colleague of mine, Anna, talking about building a community and the challenges that comes with building a community, as you know, as well as some of my followers may know that I have an academy on Podia, and literally, like you mentioned, within the past, I think, few months, I considered instead of selling individual courses. Of course, there are a lot of free resources, but instead of selling, a course for $197 or whatever, I decided that I actually switched the whole thing to a subscription. Like for $97, anybody can consume anything that is there now and what I'm going to create in the future. So I don't know why I did that, but I just wanted the content to be more accessible. So could you maybe talk about maybe even the pros and cons, or even some of the challenges, like you mentioned, about how to make selling a membership site, a subscription, sustainable?
Yeah, it's a great question, right? I think one of the advantages, so one of the advantages when it comes to a subscription, and what makes it sustainable, is often with $1,000 online course. A
Mm,
lot of the time we have that apprehension: Am I an expert? Can I sell the 997 or
mm,
497 online course? Am I good enough? Right?
mm,
But with, as you mentioned, Faye, like a 99 or $49
mhm,
subscription,
mhm,
the barrier is a lot lower for the person who's
mhm,
who's subscribing, but at the same time it's also, you don't have to, it's the expectation isn't that you're going to teach them everything in 1 month of a subscription. So one thing I'll just say right off the bat is, one of the advantages there is that it's something that it has you can start sooner. You only have to have 1 month of content, and you can
mhm,
just build it month after month. And so I would say that that's really one of the advantages. Another thing is, there's this idea that you got to create like countless amounts of content, but you
mhm,
really don't have to. There's a lot of research done in this space, and one of the things is, ironically, the number one reason that people leave services like Netflix, anything, is content overload.
mhm, mhm.
And so having too much content can actually be pretty harmful for you. So I mean, to touch on your question, how do you, was it, were you asking, Faye, how to de-risk kind of, or how do you what, can you rephrase the question? I want to make sure I covered it.
Yeah, sure. Any pros? I think we talk about pros of consistency, expected, measurable income. But perhaps what are some of the cons or challenges
Absolutely.
associated? Yeah.
Absolutely. So yeah, it's absolutely. I think one of the things is that it's not. no business is passive income in the sense that you're sleeping on a beach and you're just getting paid, right?
Mhm.
I think what people mean by that is you're not trading your time for money. You're always still working, but you're
Yeah.
not trading your time for money, right? So all things being equal, of course, with a subscription based business, there's very smart ways to do this where you're only working maybe 3 hours a week when you're engaging with the community, the kind of content you create, all of those kinds of things. But there is still a maintenance factor to it that's
Mhm.
rather than something that you create one time. So again, the
Mhm.
advantage was that you're not spending 6 months creating an online course, which is your flagship course. But the disadvantage, of course, is that to a degree there is some work. But in a way, I actually think this is one of the biggest advantages because this is something I learned in the software world, and it's called customer discovery.
Mhm.
Where oftentimes, people are not in touch with your customer, you're not in touch with their needs, and
Mhm.
so when you run a membership, you get to have a deep understanding. Phase, like
Mhm.
you run one, right? Like you get a much deeper. I'm sure you might say you get a deeper understanding of what's actually resonating. It's more timely. It's more up to date. You're actually,
Mhm.
and most importantly, you're actually helping people, right? I mean, because it's so easy to sell not so easy, but you can sell $1,000 online course and
Mhm.
that might be the only transaction you ever have with that person. And even if you don't end up helping them, well, you still
Mhm.
got their money, right?
Mhm.
Whereas here with the membership, I think if they're showing up and they're coming it back month after month, it's really an opportunity to make sure that you build confidence in yourself that you're actually helping people. And the one final thing I can say that it's a huge advantage if we're just talking funnels and mechanics and whatnot, and
Mhm.
there's more to it I talk about in my program, but um, with a membership, you can offer a free trial.
Mm.
With an
Mhm.
online course, you can't, there's no trial of the course. But with a membership, you can offer a free trial just like everyone else does. And if you
Mhm.
can blow them away in that first month or whatever period you want, then there's an opportunity there to keep serving them.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think about the fact that once you have a membership model, you are closer to your customers. And it's interesting that for me, I don't feel like it's a skill I really hone in on. It's more like they're showing up, they're buying this annual subscription at any given time. They may have seen a video 3 weeks ago or a week ago, and they're kind of all coming in at different times, which is perhaps a challenge with my community that I'm not really moving people towards the same goals at the same time. Whereas an example I've seen that's quite successful is with a colleague of mine called Carly Agar, who's running these, helping people transition in customer success jobs. And she's, I believe, maybe I'm misquoting a little bit, but her membership runs, up to 6 months, and people have full access to her online courses and getting support directly from coaches. And the fact that there are things, when you move from people from A to B, it just takes time. And I think having a community there to really be there to support them is quite essential. So, like, Kevin, do you feel like, you need a certain number of followers, community, sort of
Yeah.
fans, followers that it's already there before people can actually consider building a community? If you're watching this, please ask any questions too.
Yeah, and first of all, it's a fantastic point, Faye, you touched on there, and I want to say that that's reflecting on it, and it's something sometimes you don't always think about, but that's one of the most challenging parts with the membership
Mhm.
site is how
Mhm.
do you add value early? Because with the online course, whether you're going to learn soup to nuts how to do some one specific thing, usually, right? Lose 20
Mhm.
pounds in 6 weeks, or how to start a
Yeah.
Shopify store, or whatever it is. But with a membership site, if you only have a month's worth of content, is that person going to be, if they're a true beginner, are
Mhm.
they going to get to that point where they're like feeling that they got an outcome yet? Right. And so I think there's an element there with the membership site that's a little bit trickier to get people to the value initially if you don't have a lot of content in the start. So that
Mhm.
to say, right? And so there's a
Mhm.
balance there. But yeah, I think it's an interesting question. If you don't have an audience, can you start one? Well, I would actually say that it's probably easier to start one than an online course, because
Mhm.
if you do a free trial, what does the person have to lose? Right? Someone
Mhm.
is much more willing to say, hey, I don't really know about this person. They don't have 40 testimonials on their website,
Mhm.
but I'm not going to give them $1,000. Right.
Mhm.
So I think now it comes down to traffic, right? Of course, if you don't have an email list, then you got to earn it or pay for it. That's just, that's the reality. Right. So I think then, if you have a budget, and you have a smart funnel that can educate people about the program and get them into
Mhm.
the membership, and your numbers work out, I think you can absolutely do it with a zero audience.
Mhm.
But what I would recommend though is you actually start to help a few people for free before you build your membership, right? Maybe start doing some content, maybe try out your method on a few people, see if you can
Mhm.
create some success there, and that'll just give you the confidence to know the kind of content you're doing. But I would argue that it's actually easier to go with that than say the alternative, which is often an online course.
Yeah, and also I think we touch upon a variation of seeing ourselves as experts, have trained people to go from A to B. But I also realized, like, when I first started a community online in 2017, I remember, I mean, I was a podcaster with about 3 years of experience at the time. There
Yeah.
are also other podcasters thinking about starting. I did not feel like I could claim expertise in the area, yet I was more like an organizer, as a facilitator who basically gathered people who shared the same interest to say, hey, I'm not here to promise anything. It's more like on a weekly basis. And later on, it was bi weekly that we invite experts, we invite each other to share our experiences. So, in a way that I really had, not a lot of following and not a ton of expertise, but the community was really still growing and it was going really well. A lot of the relationships, lasted for a long time. Part of that group continued. We kind of evolved into, interesting enough, podcasters into now creative entrepreneurs. We meet once a month right now, and people from like all over the US and the world. I
Wow.
just think, yeah, I think developing long term relationships and allowing ourselves to grow and for the group to evolve, that's really interesting. If we didn't have that community or membership at the beginning, I think we would probably have lost in touch very quickly and not really have that shared vision or ongoing communication.
Yeah, Faye, I would, I've looked at, we are on, I believe this is episode 347, which is just amazing for what you've built. And I think, from, candidly, like, for the audience, Faye and I have only got connected just a few months back, but I think that's your superpower, Faye. I think it's your relationship building, your ability to kind of authentically connect with people and bring things out of them, right? And
Mhm.
just be able to be very present with them. I think it's your superpower, and I think that's why, as a content creator, I think you've been so successful. One of the
Oh,
reasons.
Oh, thank you. Well, speaking of which, we connected and I wanted to paint a picture for people who are thinking about building their personal brand because they feel like I need a superpower. I need an insane, amount of skill sets. I use the metaphor of like being a triple threat in acting. You can dance, act, and sing.
Yeah.
Whereas I realize being a YouTuber, being a podcaster, a lot of people don't realize you're not just doing audio. You're not just interviewing another human being. Instead, you're really running a business, believe it or not, and especially when you have that vision, that mindset earlier on, it actually helps you. So I would love to hear your origin story. You mentioned, I didn't realize that you were running your YouTube channel for a long time. You took years off and now your channel is monetized. Like, could you maybe talk about the
Yeah.
beginning? Because a lot of people listening will be like, well, I've been thinking about doing this for years. I just don't think I have what it takes to start.
Yeah, it's so interesting. So yeah, it's a great question. So, I always share my failures and my successes. So basically, back in 2015, a buddy of mine, he showed me his YouTube channel.
Mhm,
And what was so awesome about it is, I won't get too much into the algorithm, but I was just amazed by how his videos were just working for him 24/7. Like, you shoot a
mhm,
YouTube video, if it's a evergreen or a search focused video, you're just going to keep getting content. And so then I actually ended up making my own YouTube channel, and I ran it for about 6 months.
mhm,
But then I stopped doing that and I went off to build this sales app. And that was a long journey, and I talked about it earlier. But then just back in maybe just 3 years ago now,
mhm,
one day I was curious and I decided to check in on my YouTube channel, and it was crazy. I had videos from 2015 that were still bringing me traffic. and I
Mhm.
was sitting there like, wow, okay, this is I think I should have, if only I would have been focusing on this for the last 7 years, right? So you had kind of like that kick me moment. But yeah, so that's when I went through, I learned a lot of things, and then I realized that evergreen content, we talked about, Faye, like,
Mhm.
how do you do this in a sustainable way? Evergreen content, in my opinion, that's why I love YouTube so much, is it's the best way to not have to post. You hear things like Instagram and whatnot, like, hey, you got to post 3 times a day or 6 times a day, every 20 minutes. You hear all these things, like even sometimes TikTok, even though TikTok is now like the Gen Z search engine, which is a really interesting trend. But
Mhm.
yeah, so that's kind of how I got back into YouTube, and I started to dabble and kind of find my lane. But it's an interesting story. So it's like, yes, I've been doing this since 2015,
Mhm.
but I took about 6 years off.
6 years off. Hey, sometimes I gotta say, I was just talking to a friend of mine earlier about, like, almost like a related to relationship. You break up with someone, friend, someone you may date for a short period of time, and later on you reunite and decided that you are better off together.
Yes.
Sometimes I feel like that break, you it's really necessary. Otherwise, sometimes if I feel like for me, I've been pretty consistent on YouTube since 2019. And there are moments where like, oh, is this effort well spent? Are there better channels and things like that? You do question it. But I agree with you. Once you see the results, especially you have a business mindset, creating your content, you go, wow, in comparison, that's because we also love analytics and we measure. You look at YouTube versus, and like you said, anywhere else. Wow, the evergreen power of the content and even affiliates. For instance, haven't really done any content videos for Restream, which is the app we're using right now. Every single month in the past 6 months, I was seeing like so many leads are coming in from articles and videos created from 2021. It's just crazy to me, given all the new features, AI, this and that. Yeah.
Yeah, you're so right. I mean, there's that, you have to experience it, but I think a lot of people, I think the part where we're painting the idea that, like, hey, it's that the end state is worth it, but I
Mhm.
think a lot of people fall off in that early grind,
Yeah.
right? Because YouTube makes you really show them that you're consistent before they start giving anything.
Yeah, it's just
Right?
like, oh, heartache and heartbreak with YouTube.
And then, Faye, you touched on it. I mean, the number of skills you have to learn. Look,
Mhm,
listen, I still think it's the best use of your time if you're doing organic, but
mhm,
the number of skills that you have to learn, I think that's where it has a big learning curve, right? I think, like,
mhm.
that's where I think the biggest challenge when I think about the apprehension people have with YouTube.
Yeah, we're gonna dive in a little deep, and I've been seeing different people hopping on, so feel free to drop your questions. You're not gonna go live, you're not live streaming with us, so no worries. And I just want to really kind of dive a little deeper with YouTube, because there are a lot of misconceptions like over the years and frankly there's just so many changes in terms of the strategy direction even from world famous marketing experts. Things literally switched and completely swapped as of the beginning of this year, which is you need to niche down even further, to all of a sudden there are numerous videos coming out that say, you know what, you should really broaden your reach. You're niching down too much. You really should focus on your interests. You're like, all of a sudden people are like, what? you know, um, I was really surprised to kind of hear that because it's something I really believe in. And I want to really talk about the idea of full stack content marketing that I've been seeing so many different, positive results for us to really understand SEO, do the research, blog, create videos, embed our videos in our blog post, and, running a couple of webinars and creating, YouTube videos as well as podcasts. And this is a video podcast or somebody call a live stream, and together, our traffic is up like 4 or 5x on Facebook, which is rising tides, lifting all boats. And I wish more people could really understand the power of full stack. And just wondering what your thoughts on that is, Kevin.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we should just to unpack, just to make sure that I'm following, and everyone. What would you like? How would you define full stack? Do you mean kind of being kind of omnipresent, being everywhere on social, or how would you define it?
Great question. Because first of all, I come from a development, kind of a computer science background, and this is a full stack as a term is very focused on tech and development.
Mhm.
It means someone who knows the front end development, back end. And for people who are listening to this, watching this, means on your iPhone, you love this app. It's not just the visual and the look and feel of the app, but also what's going on in the back end, the calculation, the analytics that are going on. At the time, not a lot of people, not a lot of developers who can do both. And when they can, they're superstars at a company.
Yeah.
So we kind of borrow, my producer Herman and I just borrow this term and move that into marketing. So it really means a number of things. So number one, to define it, it is the ability to be able to do audio, video, webinar, to be able to facilitate, moderate, so, and to be able to write, to be able to design. Sure, if you use Canva, no faults to you, right? Like you use the tools that is available. So that's one area. The other is actually like end to end. Do you know how to strategize your content, really plan your content, staying organized, communicating with teams, and understand the analytics? Some people are like, oh, I hate numbers. I can't work with Excel. I can't do that. And last but not least, multi or omni channel, what you said, Kevin, is do you have the ability or the understanding of different platforms, not just trying to be everywhere all at once for the sake of it? Oh, I'm on YouTube, I'm on Instagram, I'm full stack. It doesn't mean that way. You have to know how to measure and how to go about your efforts so that is consistent and sustainable. So
Yeah.
it's a lot of things.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I come from the SaaS world too, and
Ah,
we
sweet.
could talk about. I totally get you with the
Mhm.
whole full stack analogy. I like you applying it to kind of the content creator world too.
Mhm.
I think it's interesting, right? I think video is a little different in that sense than say writing, because I think the one differentiator with video, at least when you start, is that I like to I'd like to I simplified in a way and say there's kind of the performer and the operator, right?
Mhm.
So you got to be both the strategist, the performer, and the operator, right? Like you got to be the person on camera, and that is a very particular skill set. And
Mhm.
then of course you need to know how to deploy that in a strategic way, and all that. So yeah, I do think that it is such a tremendous skill set to learn, and it's not as difficult as many people think. And I think that's the
Great.
thing to get across, right? Because I think some people always want, it's not like blogging where you can just outsource stuff, right? I think there's a real deep there's a deep level of expertise and sort of personalization you can take when you are the one talking about the subject matter, and when you're researching the content and you're planning
Mhm.
it and it ties into your message, and
Mhm.
then there's a strategic initiative that you can follow off. So all that to say, I think being a full stack creator is so important when you're first starting out, because you don't have the budget and all of these
Mhm.
things to hire an editor. And to keep in mind, I mean, I want to say that you can at some point, right? There are some
Yeah.
jobs that you can start outsourcing your editing maybe a little bit. Maybe what I like to talk about, content syndication. Maybe you make a long form video and then you outsource cutting it up into
Mhm.
the vertical slices. There's things you can definitely outsource, but I think it's such a tremendous skill set to even just understand the end to end
Mhm.
before you start to say, hey, which pieces can I take off my plate?
Mhm. Yeah, really interesting, right? You mentioned that like getting help. True. That's the biggest struggle. Is a lot of people realize I don't have the skill set. I'm interested in all these things. It's just not possible. Or I either do nothing or I hire an agency, which is I don't really have the budget for that. But there's actually a lot of in between state, and these days I think with Upwork, with Fiverr, you
Yeah.
could. I didn't realize this before that you could hire an expert, someone at a very reasonable rate to say, you know what, I really want to be able to learn and do a lot of things on my own, but I just need a partner, someone I can learn from, cheaply, with a relatively low hourly rate. And you can actually learn a lot from that person, believe it or not. And you're not alone. Having a partner, having someone send you an email, tweak something for you to show you the way, or do some Loom videos is actually goes a long way. I think the loneliness as a creator is real. Like as much as I enjoyed, I think I enjoy it more than a lot of other people, but I do hear the thrill of being a creator, but the fear of loneliness.
Yeah, that's I think COVID probably accelerated that and amplified that feeling for a lot of people.
Mhm,
But yeah, I mean, sometimes I find as a creator, you're looking to connect with people like each other, like us right here. That's why I'm glad we're
mhm,
connected. But try and go to these conferences maybe once in a few months or something. But
mhm,
yeah, I think I'd love to hear your opinion, Faye. I mean, I think you've been doing this longer than me as a
mhm.
as a solo creator. What are your tips for, I guess, dealing with that loneliness?
Yeah, the loneliness, first of all, is I think it builds stamina of what it means to be a creator. So, connecting with other people is one thing, but I also think the idea of that nature is always around us. Like we forget that sometimes. You could be living in a beautiful place, or we're at busy city streets. Get out there, actually, because when you get stuck with design or thinking about thumbnail or like keywords, that feeling of getting stuck is not always comfortable. And by staring into the screen and just like train yourself that way is actually not always effective. So I just take a walk outside, listen to podcasts, music, or sometimes nothing at all. And the other, like I mentioned before, is having partnerships. Herman, Anna, Rose, my partner Adam, they've been there. Some of them since the very beginning. Some of them, like, caught me halfway through. Having that little community. And by the way, I really believe in having like just even a single accountability partner, guys. Like, don't think of a community as like 180 people there to like root for you. You don't actually need that. Sometimes that's like less effective. People are not really as invested in what you're doing anyway. Thirdly, reaching out for collaborations, reaching out to other creators like what I'm doing with you, Kevin, because I know that we're not alone. And you won't believe me until you actually reach out to people. And it immediately, we got on a Zoom call 30 minutes. We'll be like, oh my God, we can talk about this forever. That's why I said, let's go live stream. So I think there's so many ways to connect with nature, connect with other creators and people, and to not feel alone.
Yeah, that's I think that's fantastic advice, Faye. And I guess what could you tell someone where again going back to your podcast, you've had hundreds of guests, right? Even
Mm,
names like Seth Godin on there, and I mean, how do you what would you say is how would someone start something like that? So what is
mm,
your I guess what would be your advice to say, hey, how do I, when you're reaching out to people, because I
mm,
often hear people say, well, why would anyone want to collab with me, or why would they want to come on my show? I don't even have a following or anything like that, right? Can you kind
mm.
of talk a bit about your journey, how you got started there, and how you built something with so many episodes and so many guests, and you're the most important part, you're so consistent with your guests, right? And so yeah, I'd love to hear a bit about, and I'm sure people would too, how you sort of do that.
Yeah, so in 2014, I had the urge. I think we look for pockets of inspirations, right? Like sometimes we all wait for, oh, the shiny moment. And then I feel like this calling. It doesn't really work that way. For me, the funny thing is like I'm proud to be proud to be Chinese. I'm proud of my culture. That's why I don't even want to blur my background so people can actually see during live stream the beautiful artworks done
Amazing.
by my mom. And I realized as a result, what's funny, Kevin, is the marketing agency I was working at the time, even before, for years, people walk up to my desk and they say, Faye, we're in downtown Boston. Could you take me to have some dim sum? And I love that because I love food. I love showing other people like our culture and, dim sum, it's just like,
Yeah,
tapas. It's like so
yeah,
cool, so cute. And we then just launch into these conversations. What's so crazy was I've taken people that I don't think I would naturally connect or even agree with out to dim sum just because they really wanted to eat. And and by the time they start tasting the food, whether they like it or they don't, like crazy things come out just in those moments. And at times I was like, wow, that's so cool to be able to film this, to be able to record this. And then I realized that when people feel like when they can be vulnerable in front of you, when they can be authentic, those are the stories that should be shared with the world. And frankly, I didn't really have a strategy, monetization strategy, the business I'll build from like, I didn't think about, I just didn't know how I could possibly build a business out of that. So that was really the beginning of my podcast. And trust me, Kevin, a lot of people criticized on the trajectory of Facebook, be like, you should really pre-record 7 episodes. And it's not about having fun, but frankly, it got me started. If I had to think about analytics and measure everything and then redirect the conversation in ways that could generate me money and revenue, it would have been a very different project. So that's how I got started. So I tell people, frankly, choose something that you are passionate, you really actually love doing. Don't worry about the audience. Reach out to other smaller creators. Go on YouTube today. You can actually follow people who have a few hundred subscribers instead of a few 100,000 subscribers. You can start there and just connect, because people want to share their stories. Most people have never had the opportunity to talk in this way, to make eye contact, to gaze into each other's eyes, right? Even we're actually gazing into the virtual cam right now. Yeah, it's very powerful than you think. There are way more people will say yes to you than you think.
Yeah, so what I got was those amazing, and so the super secret also is dim sum.
Simple food, culture, connection, chocolate, it doesn't matter, right? It's a
Yeah. I joke, but no, that you're absolutely right, Faye, and
mm,
I think what's so powerful there is, there's no perfect time. You don't have to have it all
mm,
figured out from day one. You will figure out more, and I think along the journey than
mm.
sitting in a room for months trying to figure it out before you start.
Oh, I
Can't see around the
completely
corner,
agree.
right?
Yeah. One thing I really wanna kinda get into, one thing, Kevin, that comes up all the time is, like, I really wanna do this, I really don't have the time. And I'm not a parent, so I cannot judge. I really don't any better, but I have many friends, my cousins who, and my one of my cousins has like a newborn baby and they're sleeping very little and we're all like so soaked up in love. Frankly, as a content creator in that environment, I go, wow, it is tough, man. I don't know how this could be possible.
Yeah.
And could you maybe talk about your experience and your belief that people with a part-time, full-time job can actually start something and can actually sustain it and run it. I want to give people hope that they can do that too.
Yeah, 100%. I think, I think the first thing is to set the right expectations, right?
Mhm,
Like I think you need to understand that obviously if you were doing this full time versus if you were doing this part time, and or you had more obligations in your life, like children or whatnot, or any
mhm,
other extracurriculars, that of course it's going to take you longer than if you weren't doing it. I think that's fair to say. And so I find that sometimes people's biggest point of failure is just not having that expectation up front,
mhm,
that the goal is not the end state. The goal, sometimes I always like to say, is like, maybe you should set incremental goals, like, hey, my
mhm,
my goal is I'm going to make 10 pieces of content.
mhm,
That is my goal, and I'm going to learn a lot in that process, and then another incremental goal, right? So I think that's one thing, right? It's like, do you have the right perspective even before you start doing this part-time? So that's number one. But then from a logistical standpoint, the truth of the matter is, I have, I built my channel completely part-time when I was doing that, right? And when I
mhm,
had a job, and when and I in my I have my first child, and he's 3.5 years old. And yeah, it definitely is a challenge. So I would say two things, right? My two biggest tips are Pareto principle, right? 80/20. You cannot do everything you want. You can't do everything perfectly, right? So I
mhm,
think
mhm,
you need to understand, hey, what are the things that are going to get me the most impact? And then how do I get to a point where it's quality output, but it's not perfect output. So I think
mhm,
those are two things to keep in mind. And then I think the other point is, and Faye, you talked about strategy. I think you have to be very meticulous about the kinds of content you're producing, right? When
mhm,
sometimes people are just doing a lot of different random things. One day they're blogging about their picnic, and next time they're talking about their iPhone they bought, and then it's about their business or whatever it is, right? And it's the algorithm gets confused, people get confused, and most people probably know this by now, that there's a level of specificity you need to get to. But I do think that just taking the time to say, hey, I'm going to produce one video a week. I'm going to film it on Monday. I'm going to
mhm,
edit on on Tuesday. I'm going to do this on Wednesday, and then you just get into systemize. You got to get really really systemized, and you have to find that pocket. And when it comes to your family, I'll just say I think you need to get the support with potentially, if you have a spouse or whatnot, to say, hey,
mhm,
I'm really want to build this, and I'm gonna, this is my work schedule. This is what I want to do on the side. And I'd really, if you could help me out, and then, if you could watch, the dependents, if you have children and whatnot, hey, can you watch them these days? And I'm going to work on these days, but then those days, if you need to do things. So it just takes a lot more planning and whatnot. Like that, I often
Mhm.
joke. My brother just had a kid, right? And he had his son, and he's only 3 weeks old. And like people who are not yet parents, the joke I always make is I go to them and I say, "Hey, those Sundays where you wake up in the morning and you're like, hey, what do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? You're never gonna have that again." Just the look of horror on their face. No, but having children is amazing, and I would just say, just jokes aside, that it's, you do just need just a little bit more into. You got to be really intentional. You can't kind of just go at that pace you were when you had a lot of time. You just have to be really intentional.
It's it's a great point, and I know that this could make some, couples' relationships stronger or weaker, right? And I think if you are in the right relationships, frankly, I think it's really exciting for your partner to hear about your endeavor and actually putting work into it and set schedule, like you said. And a lot of the parents I know who have worked with said literally, Faye, I'm maximum I can set aside, maybe 2 nights a week, 2 hours. And then later on, they always tell me, oh, I was being too ambitious because I really truly had 1 hour, or I wake up like super early in the morning. I've worked with nurses who literally would manage their social media like from 5 to 6 a.m. before they have to get ready for work. So these struggles are real. But once you're able to build a personal brand, going back to the beginning, I cannot begin to tell you how worth it that is. It's not just for the fame, oh, getting on, HBR or like being mentioned in Forbes. None of that really matters. Those are like temporary validations. And people might like, oh, that's great. But I think the real change is like the value you're able to bring, the different angles that you have. And it is nearly impossible to be original these days. You gotta look up, so you have an idea, you look up on Google, there are probably like 3 million pages, but I right? I like what Sarah Cooper has taught me, and it's so important. It really stuck with me for all these years. Is you have to remember that it hasn't been done by you, and that is so powerful. And I think looking at our background, Kevin, I don't know exactly, where you grew up, what your parents are like. You're in Toronto. I'm in Boston originally. I'm a girl, growing up in a big city in Beijing. Our unique backgrounds are so
100%.
interesting if we can distill that in our content.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think, I always talk about this kind of concept. I have it where I akin it to like a map. Often if you're on any social media platform, you're going to see people telling you that you need their three-step process. And I think it's what makes things, hey, just do these three steps and you can succeed. And I think that's what makes people feel like, well, how am I going to stand out? Because you're just being taught that everyone should just do the same thing. But to your point, and it's 1,000%, I couldn't agree more. It's
Mhm.
about discovering what's unique to you. What
Mhm.
and maybe you have, how do you combine, like, for example, like you just talked about, Faye, like you bring your experience from the tech
Mhm.
world into what you do now, and there are
Mhm.
concepts and things that you've learned and principles that someone else teaching what you teach might not be able to share. And likewise,
Mhm.
I bring those same learnings. And people I've worked with. I've worked with someone, and she was actually a chef in the army. And
Nice.
yeah, and she had a lot of discipline. And basically the short version is she had learned a lot of discipline and organization. And she runs a program now where, she's like, hey, the reason you're not losing weight is because of meal prepping. And she kind
Mhm.
of teaches a more disciplined, rigorous method to kind of, because any diet will work,
Mhm.
but sorry, any workout plan will work, but the reality is, diet is where 99% of people fall off. If you're working out every day, doesn't matter what you're doing, it's gonna work, right? And
Mhm.
so basically, she thought about her unique background, as a soldier in the army, and the experiences she had, and she's bringing it into something like the nutrition world, which might
Mhm.
be one of the most saturated kind of fields you could be in. So I 100% agree that you have to really reflect on your unique experiences.
It's so true. I mean, I'm gonna like do a quick shout out to Melissa Kwan. I did a recorded interview with her yesterday, and her last name is KH Kwan. Let me see. KWAN, I think. And she is a master at crafting stories and messages. She's the founder of eWebinar. And I couldn't believe it. Kevin, if you haven't followed her on LinkedIn, I highly recommend it. She's been writing, was daily and then down to weekly with these stories, but with her unique background as a bootstrapped CEO founder for three different companies. And
Wow.
she's now, living in Amsterdam with her husband. They're going to be living more permanently in Bangkok, making it second home. And she talks about entrepreneurship, but it's all about stories, and it's something I feel so hooked every time she publishes something. I read from beginning to end, no matter, it really catches me. Instead of me wanting to move on to my whatever the next to do is on my checklist, and that is such an art. And yet in all her posts on LinkedIn, she does not mention eWebinar, her business. There's no call to action to work with me or anything like that. It's her life story. And yet it's we don't I know precisely how much her revenue is increasing as a result of it, because as soon as she posts something, the number of comments, Kevin, is like 60 comments, 100 comments.
Wow.
It's mind-blowing. It's so masterful. Seriously.
I think you raise a fantastic point. I find like the humanity in digital marketing has been like it's so devoid. Everything is just like templates and just automations. And I love automations and AI, and I want to talk about it if we get there,
Oh, yeah,
right?
yeah, please.
yeah, 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 but I do think that there's still, stories are like have been around since the dawn of humanity, and it's one of the most compelling ways to connect with people. And if you're a great storyteller, I think it's
Mhm.
probably one of the hardest skills to master, but it's so powerful. And I find like the shortcut sometimes is just to be authentic.
True. Yeah, absolutely. So, our stories are and storytelling skills is what make our content unique. And I do want to take a moment to talk about AI automation, because I think throughout the theme here, we are very being transparent and honest about the fact that no business actually runs completely on its own with no work. So, we create business that run on autopilot. There are different ways, membership, parts of membership, and affiliate marketing. But I want to invite Kevin, you to talk about, autopiloting or maybe using AI to assist with content creation, ideation, strategy, whatever comes to mind.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So we're talking about YouTube, right?
Mhm,
And one of the things you can do, and again, everyone's going to come. I notice with AI, everyone's going to come at this with a different level of experience. There are
mhm,
people who are like, "Hey, what is Chat GPT?" And then there are people who pay for the premium version, and they're up on every single AI tool, right? So I'm
mhm,
just going to talk about it at a level where maybe at a beginner level, whereas if you could use something like ChatGPT, which is free, it's an AI chatbot, and you could literally say, "Write me the script for a YouTube video about X." And
mhm.
that will give. Now, should you use that exactly? No, I think you need to personalize it, but it would literally write you the script. And then you could say, "Make me a 60-second TikTok video about this." So just right off the bat, I think, if you would be amazed to see the amount of content and things you can do. You can do everything from write me an email, write me a contract, write me a this. So all the tasks in your business,
Mhm.
you can kind of accelerate them using AI. So I think that's the most obvious use case that I think, it just considering ChatGPT only got popularized like last November
I
basically.
know. Less
And
than a
now
year ago.
yeah, and now everyone is using it. So I think if you're not using it, you're doing yourself a disservice. And and I bring this up to say I think pure automation like this happens, and then this triggers like like email sequences
Mhm,
and funnels and things of that nature. Like I think that's been around for a while, and I think
mhm,
those are the things you should always build in, right? If someone buys a product, of course you should send them a sequence of emails. If they get your lead magnet, I think those are those automations that can really help your business. And we talked about, but then I think there are, which I call which I like to say are like almost semi-passive, or they're systemized rather than automated. I like to separate like systemized rather than automated. I think
Mhm,
systemized things are like YouTube, where yes, you got to build, you got to create that video for the first time, but then
mhm,
after you've created it, as you've talked about with your videos and mine, you're getting traffic now on autopilot. Yes, you had
mhm,
to do the initial work, of course, but and so things like ChatGPT can help you. I have, Faye, you and I are both familiar with the tool repurpose.io. I know you're actually
mhm.
making a different but similar tool that's pretty awesome, which is
Mhm.
actually funny enough. I don't know if you're gonna, I don't know where you are in the journey, so I won't say too much about it. But
All good. No, we could talk about anything that comes to mind. I'll
okay,
leave, Pod Intelligence in the comments here for anybody who's interested in learning more.
awesome.
Mhm,
Yeah. So like that would be, that tool right there, from what I understand, like this conversation, we've
mhm,
gone so wide on all of these different topics. And with Phase tool, you'd be able to figure out the exact segments and the different, and it'll separate out all those topics for you by keyword. And you'd be able to
mhm,
take those individual snippets, which is amazing, right? Just think about the work that would go into doing that. Right.
mhm,
And so while it's not 100% automated, like I think it's that acceleration and amplification. I
mhm,
find, pure automation is, you should do it when you can. But I think also another, almost like a side to that is, how do I use smart tools that can accelerate things like AI writers, like
mhm.
like there's other tools that can syndicate content for you and distribute it for you. You post on TikTok, it'll post five different places instantly. Repurpose IO is one of my good. I'm good friends with the CEO there, so I'll give a shout out to him as well. So there are, yeah, tons of great tools that can do so many things. I think it's like the wild wild west, in the sense that every month there's like a handful of new tools, and you're like, what? Like I'll just say, literally this week, I asked ChatGPT to create me a calculator,
Mhm.
and that would have been a task that I would have had a programmer do, and I'd have to find someone on Fiverr. But not only did it save me money, but it saved me time. I have to fiddle with it maybe 30 minutes, but I got a complete coded calculator for me in 30 minutes. And it's just, your imagination is the limitation sometimes with some of these AI tools.
Yeah, absolutely. The discipline it takes to learn something new, how much time let me turn that into a question, Kevin. Like, how much time do you find yourself as a parent to set aside time for purely learning discovery, new tools? Like, oh, I'm a little uncomfortable. Like, that could include new prompts as well, versus kind of, and really then how do you eliminate, kind of filter out the tools that you really like, even a particular function within a or feature within the tool that you really like, to integrate that into your existing workflow? I'm really interested in how you think about that.
Yeah, I think there's two ways, right? Right. I think there's always, you don't know what you don't know. So that's kind of like the discovery. But I'll start with like problem centric, right? I might be doing some sort of task and I'm like, shoot, there's gotta be an easier way to do X.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that might take me down the journey of, hey, how do I do X? And I find, oh, there's a tool that'll help me do X. And then you kind of learn that tool. And often those are the exact content that I put in my channel, where I'm doing my tool tutorials and whatnot,
Mhm.
to share those learnings. So I think there's one where it's very much, kind of as a result of something I need to get done. And
Mhm.
then I always try, and it is harder to do this one. I'll be honest. You don't know what you don't know. And
Mhm.
there might be some blogs I read, and I try and stay up, check out some forums and stuff. But it's that it's and sometimes I'm like, I wonder what I'm not using that's awesome.
Mhm.
Like the other day I heard about, no, not the other day, rather it was last month. I was on on a business trip, and it was with a bunch of different creators, and one of them were talking about a walkie-talkie app. And
Wow.
so, yeah, and so, unlike WhatsApp, basically picture this: it's a walkie-talkie app where it's like you can send quick messages, and
Mhm.
they use it to support their customers. And so it's
Wow.
like, and so I'm like, I didn't even know that was a thing. Right, but it's so awesome. I think there's a graphic you can find it, like marketing tools, and it shows you every year how many more. I don't even think they can update the graphic anymore, because there's probably like 10,000 or 20,000 now. So yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, I think it's. I think the best way is to kind of just focus on the problems you have and think about, can I do them more efficiently? And then
Mhm.
that way I find you're motivated to want to learn because you're like, I need to solve this problem now. So,
Mhm.
but I think it takes a higher level if you can
Yeah.
also then be like, no, but I also need to find out I don't know what I don't know.
Yes, so true. These days I agree, like looking at all these fancy AI tools, it is so easily blinding. Be like, "Oh god, I can't take this anymore." Or, "Okay, it generates a great picture. So what?" is the question. Like, "Oh, it's cute, like really cute puppy that's generated by AI. All right, what am I going to do with that?" But for creators, especially for people who are getting started, once you build your experience, you can batch your work together. But I got to say, like, I'm just as lazy as everybody else. Like something worked out great, and dinner is ready. I'm not gonna sit here
Yeah.
and analyze and like capture it and like document it. No, but it actually that extra discipline, noting yourself after dinner. I'm actually gonna write down, capture somewhere. Years ago it was like
Mm,
Evernote. Nowadays I just use Google Doc, whatever, to capture what's really worked and having that internal dialogue, but something like really visibly captured is super helpful. I was finally disciplined to do this because I run a team of like 3 4 people, and then people are doing different types of works, and I have virtual assistants as well. Like you can't just like give it to somebody to say you should just be able to read my mind and do it efficiently, accurately each time. You have to document it. So as a result, I can see, oh, that's an AI tool, here's a feature, and here's how we include it in this process that we currently have. My VM may also ask me why this didn't work, and you go, it's a collaborative process. But as much as we don't want to think about it. I think that's how we actually grow as individuals and as a group. So I just want to share that before time is running out. Kevin,
yeah,
sorry.
I'll just quickly say one quick thing.
Oh, please,
That,
yeah.
yeah, that's fantastic. And I think, to your point about, if you want to start to systematically remove yourself, or focus on higher value things in your business,
Mm,
then of course documentation, like you said, is great. And I find another side benefit of doing that is often those templates you create for yourself, you can use them as lead magnets and as extra offers in your content for other people to use. So the use, it's definitely worth the time. And I'm impressed that you discipline yourself to try and do it after dinner sometimes.
It's so no, absolutely so true. Those can be lead magnets. It could be resources for your community, for your subscription model, and
Exactly.
they're so powerful. And again, Kevin, I'm just so thrilled that you're here. And before we conclude, is there any takeaways, anything you'd like to share with our audience?
Yeah, I think I think I want to, I had thought about some things, but I really want to just stress on what one thing you said. I think it's just about getting started.
Hmm.
I think there's always, there's a saying, like like 100 reasons why you can't do something, right? You only need one reason why you can. And I find that when there's so much to learn in this online business world, and I don't want to minimize that, but I find that once you get the momentum going, you just kind of fall into it. You start figuring it out. But I find like the biggest thing is that apprehension to get started. So
Hmm.
uh whatever your passion is, I think that it's more possible than ever to get started. It's easier than ever. There's less risk than ever. It's usually just a computer, maybe a couple of $100 to register a domain and do other small things to get a couple of tools. But yeah, I think there's there's it sounds like that's a struggle for sometimes for your audience face. So I just wanted to say that believe me, I've done it part time. I have a child, and it is possible. Just have the right expectations and just get started. Have fun with it.
Yeah, have fun with it. You're not gonna regret it. So thank you so much. What a great
Okay.
final message. And for those of you who want to learn more about Kevin's work, I've listed a lot of resources and links in the description below wherever you're watching this. So please connect with Kevin everywhere if you could learn more about what he does. And if you want to learn more about full stack content marketing, there is a link there as well. If you're so intrigued. Until next time, guys, and thank you. We're going to conclude today's live stream. Bye.
Thanks, Faith. Thanks.